Alan, how are you? Good. It's been a while since I've seen you.
Afternoon, everyone. This is very exciting that we're finally getting to start this very important work. First and foremost, just want to thank you all very much for being here. I know scheduling sometimes can be very difficult, but I think daytime makes most sense for most folks here. If there is any concerns or questions on the logistics, definitely reach out to myself, Corey, Aaron. He's the Gardner, who's in the back. He's the director of policy for the city council. He'll be helping us and supporting this committee as we get started and throughout the process. Want to recognize Parker from our staff as well. Of course, our city clerks and our member from our city solicitor office. Thank you for being here. Before we get started, I'm gonna ask for a motion to end. Before we get started, we gotta do a roll call.
Councilor Sanchez,
Present.
Katuga Manakaran,
Present.
Alan Williams,
Present.
Detective David Perez,
Present.
Michael Stevens, absent, Corey Jones,
Present.
Diane Garlington,
Present.
Jill Ben Lester,
Present.
James Montero,
Present.
Lisa Pina Warren,
Present.
Juan Carter,
Present.
Michael Olden,
Present.
PJ Fox,
Present.
12 present, 1 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we get started on the agenda items, I want to ask for a motion to enter the 3 pieces of paper that we all should have. I think the council packet will be 1, the Office of Justice Program will be 2, and then the last piece of the National Criminal Justice Association will be item 3. So I do need a motion.
I want to make a motion for items 1, 2, and 3 to be added to the.
Can I get a second, please? Second. Thank you. So first item of business, can you please read item 1 into the record, clerk, please?
Item 1, organizational meeting, election of chairperson and election of vice chairperson.
Are there any nominations for chairperson?
I want to make a nomination. I want to make a motion to nominate Councilor Miguel Sanchez as the chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? For any further nominations? Since there is no further nominations, the clerk is hereby directed to cast 1 ballot for myself, Miguel Sanchez, as chair of the Pathway to End Gun Violence Advisory Council.
So noted.
Thank you. Are there any nominations for vice chairperson?
I would like to elect Corey Jones as vice chair.
Is there a second?
Second. Second.
Second by Lisa. Lisa, how are you?
Good, how are you?
So motion made by Dave Monteiro, seconded by Lisa. Are there any further nominations?
I'd like to nominate Diane as the vice chair.
One second.
Is there a second on that nomination? Second by Lisa. Or by Jill, sorry. Let me ask you, if there's any other nominations?
Again,
Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations?
to nominations.
So, how do I? do that?
Can I make a motion? Can I, I'd like to make a motion that we have two co-chairs.
I would second that. We need an amendment to the agenda, or how do we go through that?
So make the motion for the two co-chairs and.
So how's everyone feel on that?
Favor?
Favor.
Favor.
So we'll have two co-chairs.
The motion, we need a second.
Second.
Mike
Second.
Hogan.
So with that being said, before we jump into item number 2, I just want to recognize and thank you all for committing to this very important work. We've all been impacted by gun violence one way or another, violent crime in our community. And it's very important that as a municipality that we take this step in trying to do everything that we can. We're going to be focusing on community violence intervention initiatives through this advisory council, but I want to be as fluid as possible, have as many conversations as possible. Some conversations that are going to be very difficult on acknowledgement on what we need to be doing better as a city. Also tapping into all the amazing existing programs that there already currently is. I know a few folks here already part of said organizations. But it is very important, especially right now where there's so much federal grant opportunities when it comes to CVI. I want to congratulate PJ Fox as well. He has taken a position of the AG's office in a newly created community violence intervention office there. So as a city of Providence, a capital city, it's very important that we're doing this. And yeah, like I said, I want to be as fluid, as real, as honest as possible. Obviously, let's try to be as respectful of one another. There's going to be a place in every meeting to allow for public comment as well. Just because it's so important to make sure that the community is heard and their voices are as collaborative as possible with this community. So with that being said, we'll be moving into item number 2, if the clerk can lead that into
Item 2, overview of community violence intervention.
So with this, we'll have, from my understanding, PJ and Corey give a presentation overview.
So yeah, this will be really conversational. Feel free to ask questions throughout. Feel free to, folks to fill in the contacts. Yeah, feel free for folks to fill in contacts. Obviously, a lot of folks here have a lot more history on this work in Providence before me. So I want to, make that clear that, I'm speaking on the academia side, but you folks really know what has happened, how it's happened, and I want to, make sure that any point in the presentation, feel free to interject, whether, you have something negative or positive to say, because, this work is really sensitive to, the work that we do. And before I get started, I want to make it clear that, I'm a survivor of gun violence, and so this comes from a personal place, as everyone else on this table as well. I've lost 8 friends and family members to gun violence, and I'm originally from Chicago, so, every day I get a phone call from that area code number. It's, my stomach sinks because it could be another phone call. So yeah, So this is what we'll go over, what's community violence intervention, definitions and diagnosis, components of CDI, and then next steps, which I believe for this committee, also that, you know, I'm not determining what the next steps are, that's a time for folks to interject as well. So community violence intervention is an evidence-based comprehensive solution to reduce violence through multiple strategies that make up what we call CVI, community violence intervention. Some of those strategies, but you know, it's not limited to these strategies, it's focused in terms of policing, therapies, job training, hospital prevention model, street outreach workers. So, you know, there's only so much we'll be able to do in a year, in 2 years. And so, you know, I think it's important that we pick out the components of CBI that are most important to us and kind of work our way from there because this work really doesn't end. And a lot of times it fails because people believe that, you know, you fund a certain amount for a certain period of time and then crime goes back up. So this is continuous work. And employment, mentorship, and therapy are 3 of the most important services in this work. So community violence intervention lies on one fundamental ideal, and that's violent crime is predictable and is preventable. It's that violent crime happens, murder in the United States really happens at random. Violent crime happens in hot spots with hot people, and if you target these patterns, you can stop much of violent crime that happens. So some of the cities, and you know, right now is really the pinnacle for CDI. So I think in the next 5 years, we're really going to see, you know, a huge difference around the country because Biden has made a lot of different federal funds available for CDI, which means it's also more competitive. But there's a lot more money that is out there. So New Orleans had a successful 30% decrease in gang members involved homicide. Boston, Massachusetts is really one of the birthplaces of CDI. In the 90s, they've seen a 63% reduction in youth violence, 40% overall reduction. They're also a place where they continued their CBI methods and didn't stop. And they've seen, you know, during the pandemic, there was an article that said, while crime has risen everywhere else, crime has not risen nearly as much in Boston because of their continued efforts. Chicago is a place where, you know, spotting, they do some, they see efforts, and then, you know, funding goes away, and it's really a large city with a very difficult place to reduce crime in. Oakland, California was one of the model examples as well. That's called the ceasefire, you know, model, and they reduced crime by 28%. I believe that was from 2012 to 2017. Another study recently came out and said that the ending of ceasefire is directly correlated to the increase in violence in Oakland right now. So we know this stuff works. I want to open up the floor for folks that know about times where this has worked in Providence, because it's important to recognize that, you know, CDI has worked here, but we have to continue those efforts and build off of them and not allow them to lose funding and allow, you know, momentum in governments to let it die down. So if folks want to add some context, I appreciate it.
I mean, yeah, CBI has definitely worked here in Rhode Island, particularly here in Providence. 2016, there was 0 gang-related homicides, a lot due to the effort of CBI strategies and a little luck. I think we can't not think about luck. I mean, they definitely work, and it's a combination. It's not just one particular intervention. There has to be a combination. And partnerships, communication has to be really strong for it to be effective. That's, you know, the 2 folks around this table who've been involved in this work for a long time. And I just think it's, you know, the more we can be talking about this and brainstorming interventions and strategies, we can see really great success here. Providence particularly is very small comparative to the cities on here. And we know it's just a small subset of individuals that are causing the majority of violence. So if we can figure out strategies to intervene, I think we've had really good success here.
I would just add, in terms of, I think we have to define what this looks like for Providence, because even nationally, when we talk about CBI, there's no cookie cutter, right? So you can't take one model and put it here and say that's going to work. I think we got to define what community violence intervention in terms of strategy looks like in Providence and what that means. I would add some edits to this definition of community violence, meaning that it has to be community-led and community-driven. And then one thing added in there is the approaches and methods and strategies need to be non-punitive. And so I would add that to that. In terms of, right, obviously, I know Thomas App very well. I was actually part of this book, shameless plug. But Thomas App is only one researcher in the country, right? He is you don't hear this conversation across the country, focused deterrence, right? Which has law enforcement, it's kind of law enforcement driven. But that's his focus. He does focus on focus deterrence a lot. So I think we need to expand where we get our information and sources. I would say at this point, currently, Chicago is probably the leader in CBI efforts, funding, strategies and everything like that across the country. So just going forward, right, just using more sources to expand the knowledge and how we inform the work that's going to be done here.
Yeah, Juan works at Giffords Violence Reduction Center. And so, I'll be attending the conference that they have every year. So that'll be great, learning opportunity for me, because my entry to CBI was through Thomas Ave, but, it's important to not only look at researchers, but also to look at implementers. Because, it's easy to say something from your ivory tower, when you're actually on the ground, implementing programs. Those are the people that really know how to make this stuff happen.
If I could add to that, in regards to the dates here, 2014, I said 2014, 2013, and 15, I'm from Boston. So I think that we need up-to-date data, because it definitely has changed. It was great that implementation worked at that time, but definitely need up-to-date data.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was kind of my question. I agree with you. I'm curious to know what led to a 63% reduction in violence in Boston. I work with a few agencies in Boston, and I kind of see Boston very closely related to Rhode Island as Boston is to Texas.
Right.
I mean, not Boston, Baltimore.
Right.
So I could to that, so it was Operation Ceasefire by David Kennedy. If anybody's familiar with Teddy Gross, he was part of that work in Boston and kind of brought like a hybrid model here to Providence. But that 63% was in a short time span. It was like 6 months. So like the story out there is that it was like over this year long. It was in a very short time span. And it was very focused deterrence heavy. It was with juvenile probation, street outreach workers, and just using services. But also there was already a decline in the homicide rate happening already. That implementation of that work kind of didn't happen in a short span of time. But also wasn't sustainable, right? So you have that. But great work, right? It was a foundation for some of the work that we see across the country. But it had juvenile probation attached to it.
One of the big mechanisms, which is very laid out, Boston flooded their summer. They had, I forget how many summer jobs. I mean, they had. I think they tried to employ about 1 million kids.
Wow.
It was only 2 months, so one of the adults. It was just.
So it was targeted intervention workers found interacting with young folks, and they made a concerted financial investment into making sure that young people had things to do in the summer. And one of the big things was summer employment.
Right.
Just to bring it back to Providence, we do have illegal summer jobs for
Or before we continue, this is a really good conversation, because that's something that I'm not interested at all, is to go super heavy, super fast, the next 3 months, see homicides deter for a set amount of times, and then jump right up, and then you look back and you're like, oh, it was good for 6 months, that's the data that we're throwing out there. I'm not interested in looking good, I'm interested in actually implementing and creating programs and social support networks that are in place and hopefully sustainable long after any of us are here around this table. Is my quick point on that. Before we continue, Juan, you mentioned focused deterrence as one of the CBI methods. Is there any other methods benefits that you could quickly mention, just so folks maybe can write some notes down and do some research on their own? Because I don't think that there's that, are they mentioned in the?
So yeah, further in, we name a few, but the few I picked, you could roll a dice and grab 4 or 5, right? There's a lot of different strategies.
And so that's why I said, I think it's how we define it here in Providence.
Right.
I would say nationally, by the majority, focus deterrence is not considered a CPI strategy. It's considered an alternative because of the law enforcement piece. But again, like I said, whatever fits for Providence, fits for Providence. I mean, this pure violence is another strategy, which that's another debate of what people like about pure violence. But I think the field is more diverse than it's ever been. Like, we got a lot of TA providers out there providing training and technical assistance for small CBOs that are doing this work. So that, again, there's not one strategy. I think I think with the implementation of CDI, knowing that it takes a collective concerted effort from everybody in the community, I don't think there's one specific strategy. There's not one specific strategy out there right now that people are saying, hey, I want to do this, right? Focus deterrence does have, on the research side, right? Like, there's a lot of research attached to it, guys that have been around for years. And so, David's done great work in that regard to make sure there's concerted research happening. So CDI is one of those things. There was just a CDI action plan convening in Chicago, where there was some mixed bag of emotions, right, in terms of, right, who's going to be the national thought leaders behind this work, who's going to offer this work, who's going to lead the work. And so I think that struggle is going to continuously happen, but I think work can be done in other places where, I mean, Lisa, PJ, we've had this conversation, and I don't want to James up, James is
James is one of us.
I think Providence is one of those places where, I think it's been on a downward trend, right? But I think, even national, federally, right, Providence is considered a safe city. Right, air quotes. But how do we keep it safe?
Right.
And safer, I think is how we need to think about this, moving forward. And to your point, right, like this, nobody's gonna come in and wave a magic wand and say, hey, we decrease violence this year. We gotta think about the next year and the year after that, right? How do we sustain that? So I don't think there's one model, but my part in this, I can also just share what's happening nationally to this group, right? In terms of information. PJ was at that CBI action plan. There's a version 2 out. So there's a document that was laid out. But again, some of the strategies or what's in that document is very biased by the individuals that are authored this report. So, yeah.
Can I also say, I think a lot of the strategies that we sometimes reflect on a national level, I think we have to take some time and implement local level strategies also, and we don't have a lot of that.
One of the, what is well documented in all of the strategies is the component of intervention outreach workers, and what their ability and having folks that have the ability to connect to folks who are most likely to shoot, most likely to be shot, most likely to commit a violent crime. It's the highest of high risk. And if you really want to lower shootings and so forth, those are the individuals that have to be engaged with. And that is very, very difficult. Everyone around the table, I think, understands that. There's most individuals coming from very low to very low income. So they're dealing with all of the effects of poverty, and then having to go outside and look over their shoulders because they're in fear of being shot. That's a person in crisis all the time. And those of you around the table that do this work understand that that's a very difficult place for a person to be, but also a very difficult person to continuously engage with. And so my hope here is that we're also thinking about how do we support folks on the front line that are doing this work and engaging with those individuals, so that they're getting enough support to continue to do it. Because as the Institute knows, and a lot of folks around the table, it's also very hard to find those individuals that can make that relationship. So there's something to be thinking about.
And then the other thing is, right, intervention and prevention, and how those two distinctively different. Like, the work, preventative programs have always been funded.
Right.
Right, those after-school programs, things like that have always been funded. I think the truth of the matter with intervention in the population that PJ is talking about, they cost a lot of money. Right, these are individuals that are gonna, they need more than a kid that just wants to do the boys club or the recreation center. Right, they need housing, they need medical, they need sustainable employment, right? Summer jobs are good, and there's no knock against summer jobs, but then we also have to identify the age groups that are committing the violence, right? So if they're adults, summer jobs is not necessarily for this particular strategy. We need sustainable employment for those individuals.
You need jobs that, connect to a career pathway, right? You might be able to give them a summer job for 2 or 3 summers, right? But then what happens after that? Juan, do you have any context if there's been any like new data supporting CDI? Do you have any example cities that?
I'm not on me right now, but I can share those, like Chicago, again. People wanna look up Chicago CRED, which is an amazing organization doing great work. CRED, CREED, doing amazing work. Tenny, Institute of Nonviolent Chicago, doing amazing work. We was just with Tenny, and we're kind of upset with Tenny because he has like this 100 staff now. 100 staff.
That's why.
We were the guinea pigs, we suffered, and Tenny's now succeeding in Chicago. So when anybody sees Tenny coming to the city, make sure you let them know. Yeah, the house. What is that?
As soon as he crosses the line, I'm gonna get him.
What is that? I think he's in class.
I think he's gonna avoid you.
I wanna add some, it's because of the work that I do. I think I do the education inside the Department of Corrections, and we handle the mentorship contract for, DOC ages, 18 to 21. And there's a lot of information at the DOC in regards to who has issues with who. People are segregated, due to the issues, and there's a lot of, stuff happening at the DOC that if tapped into, we get information when we know someone's coming out who we know is a major shooter or who is somebody who is very high risk to be shot. And a lot of issues happen when people come home from prison because you'll have shot bullets in there. The people that are calling shots. So I just think that the information that is there, somebody needs to communicate with what's happening at the DOC, because stuff that is happening at the DOC, a lot of Providence problems are the department, and I don't want to say this, but our failure to properly address these issues inside there, such as capability of getting employment or being prepared for employment or counseling, or because that stuff spills over, and at least 40% of the people that leave the Department of Corrections are coming back to Providence.
Yeah, we have one of the highest rates in the country right now for recidivism in our DOC. I think we're like 47.
So if I can add to that, James, you're aware, we have had discharge planners that were in the DOC, and they worked through the Institute, and that was a great source of information. And just like anywhere, like it took us 20 years to build a relationship that we have with PPD, right? It takes trust, right? So even with the prison system, it took a lot of time and a lot of trust. But what happens is there's change.
Yeah.
People leave, people come. So over the years, we've had built relationships internally with those that valued the work because they've seen the efforts and they've seen the changes. But when you have that change to try to rebuild that trust again, it's starting from a clean slate, and how do you get there, right? So the turnover has affected us a lot. We still have some folks that will, and a lot of it's through the streets, right? Those shot callers that are calling people, you know, they will inform us or inform other workers or people that, you know, are respected in the community. But to really have that partnership, it's kind of like you're reaching for straws. You know, they don't really want to share information. You know, there's a gang, committee of some sorts that, I know a few people are on it, but they're very selective who they allow to be on it. And it's sharing information. It's sharing who came in, who's going out. It's sharing who is, SRG, which means they are labeled as a gang member and they're restricted. So being able to build on those relationships or getting into those rooms where those conversations are happening is really, really important.
I think this process, in terms of strategy, I think we have to be honest about the process too, and people's personal commitment. Right? So
Yes.
we'll step aside. Personal commitment to the strategy it's gonna be money. Right? People are gonna say, you know, nah, I want to be part of the strategy, but capacity is an issue for a lot of organizations. And so that's the money, and that's the way we're gonna hold people accountable, right? Like, it's like, hey, you're part of the strategy, you're funded to be part of the strategy. This is what we need from you. So I think in terms of as we go along with the strategy, I think we have to be honest about that, right? Or people being part of organizations or partners being part of this strategy have to be honest about that too. What their capacity is.
Yeah, so James and Jill and I, you know, with DLT are working on a program. You know, the reason why we haven't asked others to be part of that program, just because of the limited funds, we want to secure dollars from other places and then attach on, you know, other entities and be able to fund them properly. But we're looking to put, you know, anywhere from 250 to 350 to have some case managers that'll be taking in, you know, some type of referral system for individuals, you know, that may be exposed or susceptible victims or perpetrators of gun violence. So, you know, our department is going to be putting some money, you know, where our mouth is. And I think I would like to see part of this process be asking different departments to present what programs do you have that could relate to this work, and then how much money can you put, or can you change your service, your policy, your priority of service policy to make it so any individual that's a James or, you know, David Perez sends to them gets priority of service. We're not trying to make them fill out 20 pages of documents and figure out if they fit this criteria. Guys, and no, if they're exposed to violence, if, you know, this individual sent them, then we're going to give them services as soon as possible.
Yeah, if I could have this three scenarios I've heard numerous times throughout the years. Three things have been money, as one said, then collaboration and sharing information, as you mentioned, and then lastly is data. If you have the data and you share the data, you can kind of get a scope of what work needs to be done to correct the situation here. But I think also with organizations, a lot of personal scenarios come into play, right? I don't really like James personally, so I don't want to engage with James, although this isn't about James and I, this is about this situation we're trying to correct, right, saving lives. So I think that's another thing, right? You have to leave the ego at the door.
It's a
Even in this room here.
historical Providence.
Correct. Yes, thank you, historically. I mean, I'm from Boston. As soon as I came there, they were like, yeah, you gotta try to do all of this now. You don't know.
Well, one thing is because you're from Boston.
That really has been a real thing. Yeah, I think I've been fortunate because I'm from Boston, not here, but I have relationships with a lot of different people that they don't have internally with themselves in the city, but that's always been a hindrance that I've seen. I hate it.
It is.
Honestly.
So, I mean.
So James, you can go, and then David has something to add, and then
yeah.
I'm gonna get back to Corey, so I think we could talk all day. I appreciate all the good engagement. though.
And just a quick, when everybody's speaking, if you can just address the chair so that he knows who's speaking, and then he can just let you know whose turn it is to speak, so everybody's not over talking to each other. And we're all on the same page. Thank you.
Organization, I like it.
We were very relaxed on those things.
I agree with everything that's said, especially the resources, especially the data and the collaborations. And we have limited resources, data drives decision making. And I think that I agree with you, Lisa, is when admins change, things get lost. But I would think that the city of Providence, if 40% of the people that are leaving the Department of Corrections are coming back to Providence, and I work with the data system. There's an enormous amount, and the police department. There's an enormous amount of data. I've seen parole and probation officers like pull me over in the hall of the Dix building and say, this person is coming home. What's being done for him? Does anybody know? Do you know he's coming home? I would hope you do.
No.
That's a problem.
It is.
So
That's a problem.
So what I was gonna say is just a lot of what you said and what you said about the gang intervention program or the gang intelligence unit at DOC. I just found out, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, that they have a monthly meeting
Yes,
where they actually put a lot of this information out there. So I literally just found this out through a friend of mine at juvenile probation, which again, it just goes to the fractured system for us communicating with one another. High priority incidents or individuals, we may get a word that they're getting out. If there's a lot of urgency to, hey, we believe this person's coming out and this is gonna happen right away. Other than that, no, there's not a system in place for, hey, these guys are coming out and we believe them to be, X, Y, and Z or whatever may happen, unless there's something like some kind of imminent threat, imminent danger that people think, somebody sounds the alarm all the way up. There's no regular, and like I said, I'm a juvenile detective now, but I've been working, Juan's known me forever, I've been working closely in the streets, I do mentoring and all kinds of stuff in Providence forever. And I didn't know about this meeting until last month. So, maybe more communication on what things are already in place that we can just take advantage of from my end.
So I just think it's really, I agree with everything. Communication data. I just think something that we just need to focus on that Juan's already brought up is that this has to be a community-driven effort. And community-led. And how I think the sustainability question is how well a group like us can actually institutionalize some of the values of CDI into everyday programming and organizations in the city that work with young folks and adults or returning citizens, all of those populations. I think it's really just important for us to stay focused on being community-led and community-based and just making sure that we're institutionalizing that idea and those values.
Yeah, I love that. We're institutionalizing CBI values into existing programs, but I love that, but it's also sometimes, as someone who works in an institution, sometimes institutions are the opposite of community, right? And so, it's what we have to do, but it's almost oxymoron, right? Because I can tell you, most of the folks, 490 people in DLT probably, don't know anybody. And if they do know someone, they might know the name of their entity and that they write a check for them, but they might not know the man behind them. I was surprised that, folks in my division were funding James, but they didn't know the man behind this program. And I'm like, you guys gotta meet this guy. And they're like, wow, this is crazy. Like he went through like his life, his experience, right? And it really like changed the way they see that grant program, but in institutions we're really looking at it like numbers, and that's a problem too. That I don't know how you fix that, but it's a task of ours. So another thing in CBI, and you guys touched on it. We're talking about data, right? And so that data can tell you a lot, right? Because there's 3 factors that are the most connecting to the individual who will experience victim or perpetrator of violence. That's age, young people, gender, overwhelmingly men, criminal history, folks who have a criminal history or connect to someone that has a criminal history. I think, often one thing about gender and, and overwhelmingly being men, I think CBI oftentimes forget how much the women in the family take on Growing up, I remember my mom did everybody's snaps, everybody's, benefit programs, and, really the women of our family had to take on, all these challenges because most of the men were incarcerated. There's a lot of programs that support families, and if we do exactly that, put the CBI values into those existing programs, and then target the families of the individuals who are, experiencing violence, I think that also could be conducive of creating, more prevention, right? Yeah.
Corey, we're also seeing an alarming amount of young women that are more heavily involved in are the leaders or the ones who are actually putting these incidents of violence together. They're the conductors of making sure that someone meets someone somewhere and then there's a victim. So the young women are heavily involved.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just like to add to that point. So I'm also on the recreational advisory board, and we've been going out to all the rec centers to have meetings there on a monthly basis, and that's like one of the top 3 concerns that we hear from every director is just the lack of support and programs for young women. Very minimal interest in any of the rec programs. So what does that lead to is they're in the streets committing crimes and doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. So
They also have become the ones who carry the guns and hold the guns and, so it's very dangerous.
Yeah, and it's the hardest part about this work is that things are constantly changing. I know that, something huge during COVID, in the housing crisis, my next slide, I'm gonna talk about hot people, hot places, right? Which is, our definitions, right? I'm not sure if this statistic is still true. Most cities, 4% of city blocks account for 50% of crime because, with the housing crisis, we've seen people moving and we've seen crime become more mobile, right? So, it's almost like, we're playing cat and mouse games because, these things are constantly changing. Yeah, so, 1% of your population commits 80% of your crime. Sometimes that could be, 0.03% that commits 70% of your crime. And so the good news is that it's a small population of individuals, and if we have the resources to give to those individuals, then we can virtually reduce or virtually eliminate violent crime in the city, right? And so, and 4% of city blocks that account for 50% of crime. So 50% of crime is unreported. And when crime is unreported, the individual might be stabbed or shot, they're still gonna go to the hospital. But the hospital is not gonna be able to give personal identifiable information, first name, last name. So instead, what people do in the hospital prevention method is the hospital will give information about hotspots or where that individual may have came from. And then, the fact that they'll give it to usually like a health department. So then that data is protected from over-criminalization. And they'll use that to direct services to those individuals and those families. So, those are 2 of our most important demographics, and then we'll go into the different type of shooters. You have your would-be shooters. This is an individual who may one day carry a gun, may hang around individuals who carry a gun, but they are not necessarily carrying a gun right now or a shooter at the moment. A someday shooter is someone who may pass around a gun amongst a group. They may hold a gun, may have not used that weapon yet, but they may just be one conflict away from becoming a bona fide shooter. A bona fide shooter is an individual who has committed acts, with their gun and are carrying the gun, and these are usually the ones that are already on the radar. So right now, the program I talked to you guys about that we're gonna be putting together, we have the resources to target would-be shooters and someday shooters, but without the federal dollars that we're seeking and, other financial support, we won't be able to move to bona fide shooters. But, that is gonna be the most important part, is making sure that we're able to reach the individuals who are, most involved in violent crime. So as we talked about focus in terms of policing, but I think the thing about focus in terms of policing is, when PJ explained how it happened in the past, really wasn't how I imagined it. I think that, if the individual is getting a phone call from a police officer, I think that that's the last case scenario. If an individual is getting a phone call from Juan or from, a street outreach worker, and they're saying, look, this officer called me and told me this is gonna happen, to me, that is the best case scenario of focus deterrence policing. But, yeah.
That, we have examples here, right, so like if focus deterrence, what you'll see is they call in the individuals, usually the bona fide shooters, right? Those that are on probation or parole, they call them into a room, which looks like a courtroom for most, and then you'll see this panel of every law enforcement agency in the country, right, from federal, state to local law enforcement. And basically, what you'll see is they'll say, hey, we know who you are, we know what you've done, and if we catch you again, this is what you get. Or you can take advantage of these services. Now, if you look at the room, you'll see young men sitting in their chair like this. Right, because they already know. They know that if they get caught again, they go into prison. They already know that, right? So to say that to them again, right, and this the optics. I'm in a court again, right? For law enforcement officers to tell me they're gonna arrest me for the stuff I've been doing, I know I'm doing. We changed it here one time, and I think it worked, right? Where we gave the cold call, right? This the outreach team, street outreach workers, hey, Alan, it's calling. We had it at the institute. We sat in a circle. Yeah, this is when Isabella was lieutenant still. Came in, and so we had family services involved, right? It was like we tried it, but it was through PSN grant, right? And again, a grant that ran out, no more money, no more program, right? No more project. And we called in, it was about 10 guys, we called them in. Of course, they're skeptical, right? Like, so police here, there's probation here, right? But it was a conversation. It wasn't like, hey, right? And obviously, again, that's why I say no cookie cutter program fits one particular city, right? It's because what we established with Providence Police Department that was able to happen, right? It is available in, right? So the officers, obviously, the police department has to buy in. And only one guy took advantage of the services, right? But which was fine. But we actually went door to door of those 10 individuals. Who do you want to come to your house and who don't you want to come? Right. Obviously, they said, police, everybody, I want a police officer in my house. You can come, and we went. And unfortunately, it was, something else happened, but I think if that can continuously happen, right? You establish a culture of, all right, this is how a call is done in Providence, right? This is how we can reach young people. So you have the typical call, and then you have what we was able to do at the police department. I mean, at the non-license.
Yeah, and I think, one of the keys to focus deterrence is not arresting, right? If you have an individual, sometimes what I've read is that, police culture might be like, oh, I'm gonna get this guy, I got this on him, I got this, but it's almost goes against nature to say, you know what, let's not arrest him, and let's see if these guys can help him with the services they have, and really bringing us, say, 25%, all right, these are some guys I'll back off from, right? Let's see what y'all can do with them, right? To me, that's really the core, because we have to accept that if, we have this like tradition of like, oh, one chance and that's it. It's like, no, people need a second chance, a third chance, and a fourth chance. And at the end of the day, if this individual is not right now shooting and he is down that pathway, let's get him while we can before he becomes a violent shooter. Because the number one thing about CBI is being focused. You have to focus on the people who are committing the sheer most amount of crime in the city. Right, because if you focus on getting the big drug bust, if you focus on, these other things, then, there's one more shooter that's on the street.
Corey, I'm glad that you said, about giving second, third, fourth chances, right? Because we have experienced that, you work with a youth and yeah, he may pick up a gun again, he may shoot someone, he may go to prison, he may do some time, he may get out, he may violate, he may go back in, but as long as you're continuing those relationships and making sure that there is still supports put in place, if they're in prison, you're still sending a letter, you're still showing the support. We now have outreach workers that work for us that was once that young person that had 2, 3, 4 chances, right? The fifth time could have, they made the right choice now, they're doing the right thing, not saying that they're always gonna do the right thing, I can't put my name on everybody, but now they're in a place that they've been given all these chances, but it could have been the second time that they felt like everyone gave up on them, and it could have been a worse outcome, you know what I mean? So sometimes it is second, third, fourth chances, putting those supports in place, and they look differently, you know what I mean? It's not just, it could be through James's program, it can be, and that's again about collaboration, Alan, right? Relationships, everyone knowing each other and plugging people into these resources. And I might not be the person to give them a third or fourth chance, but hey, James, I got this guy, he might be the person to give them that fourth chance.
Before we continue, I'm gonna try to, future meetings, I'm gonna try to keep, close to an hour as much as possible, just to respect people's times. We're a little close to that right now, so I think this first meeting, if folks need to go, more than welcome to go. But we'll probably be closer to an hour and 30 minutes today, if that's fine for folks.
Yeah, we're almost done. So I went over the hospital prevention model, which was, getting the information from the hospital for individuals that aren't, documented. So these are some of the resources that I kind of cherry picked, from the strategies. Home visiting and parent training, has a significant correlation, working with a parent. These are infants, right? Working at the infant stage has correlations to reducing violence as teenagers and adults, right? And so, this is a program that is funded through DHS right now, right? But are they targeting the individuals and the families that need it the most? Street outreach workers, as we know the Nonviolence Institute has, we have to get that funded. We have to get that program funded, we have to get these federal funds locked down, so we can connect that, because that is really one of the core, 24-hour, working, workers that are gonna be able to do that intervention work. Cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma-informed cognitive behavioral therapy is important as well, just a little bit more pricey. Functional family therapy, and trauma-informed functional family therapy as well. Working with the individual and then working with the family, those are two of the most, and through therapy are two of the most important components. And so, again, this is what I believe our role is. I think this is open for discussion, but that police referral system, right, the data, right? Where do we store the data where we know that it's safe? How do we collect that data, and how do we, give those referrals out is gonna be really important to this work, and creating, an MOU that basically says, these individuals will provide data, this individual will curate, clean the data, and then they'll, have some type of referral system to these different entities based on these services. It's really important. I started an MOU. I'll be starting with James and Jill's organizations, putting that MOU together, and then we'll have all the partners sign on to it. As we go through, the different specific activities that each individual entity will bring, and then, we'll try to use that MOU to get more federal dollars. Identifying state agencies, right? Let's have these state agencies come. First, we need to figure out, okay, what do we want to ask them for, right? Make it a priority of service, right? How much money do you have discretionary? Who are you funding, right? Who could you be funding? When is the next solicitation for your grant, right? Getting all that information, and then having them come and present to us, and then asking them, these questions, and making sure we can align their efforts to the work we're doing. And as PJ said, institutionalize CBI values into the work they're doing. Priority service policies, and then grants. So as you all have the CBI PI grant in your packet, that is a grant that we'll be applying for about $2 million. So that's gonna break out a lot of different ways. If we do a good job, we'll put together a good application. As Juan said, I believe that we're considered a safe state, so that's going to be a challenge that we'll have to work against. But if we have the right type of coordination and we're connecting to those folks in those positions, then we should have a really good chance. So that concludes my presentation. And
Thank you, Corey. Just in the sake of time, I think we can talk about what we would like the next meeting to look like, and then we'll leave about 10 minutes for any further comment or further discussion between the committee. So going back to the comments about being community-led and community-driven.
Yeah.
I think that's super important, 'cause I think without that, this whole project and our efforts are pretty pointless, to be as frank as possible. So I think at some point, it does make sense to open it up, to have like a forum or open invite at either PCTA or something like that. But I think before we do that, I think having a better understanding of the numbers from the Providence Police Department and the current programs that exist around this table would be super important. So I think just from my point of view, I think having the next meeting here at City Hall to have overview of such programs around the table, get data from the police department, but I'm open to any feedback and other ideas.
I think that makes sense, because even though to Alan's previous point, that we might know individuals at organizations, we also don't know what that organization does in its entirety. Right, so I know James, I know, RCP, but, all right, what does RCP do, right? Like, what does the organization bring to the table? So I think that alleviates some of the misconceptions of, well, you're supposed to be doing this, but you do this, so you're not doing this, well, that's not what we do, right? So people, public perception, some people think organizations have more than what they don't have, right? And so I think part of the next meeting, organization saying, hey, this is the services that we provide, for everybody.
So who would be able to present maybe I think 5-6 minutes next meeting for this group?
I'll throw some stuff out there for next meeting.
Mike Hogan, you're from the Grant Administrator's Office?
Yep, Department of Public Safety. Yeah.
I think that would be helpful too. I think just if you can share if you are affiliated to any org or state agency, I think I skipped that part.
I have a question, yeah, so I know a number of people in the room, but I don't know everyone. So if we could just kind of do like a quick introduction, I think that would be great, just to kind of familiarize ourselves with one another.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I'm sorry for not doing that.
No worries.
Miguel Sanchez, I'm a Providence City Councilor. I represent Ward 6, mostly the Mount Pleasant and neighborhoods of the city.
Detective David Perez, I'm a youth service detective with the Providence Police Department. And I currently am assigned to districts 2, 3, and 1, which is downtown and most of the south side areas.
Hi, I'm Lisa Pina Warren. I'm the Director of Intervention Services at the Nonviolence Institute.
Diana Garlington, I am the Administrator for Policy and Equity at United Way, and also the founder of Safer Communities for Justice.
Hey, my name is Stephen Minohern. I work for Mary Smiley's Policy Office, and I'm his designated to this.
My name is Alan Williams. I own a development company and I do real estate, but the main thing that I would say that I'm blessed in the sense of I'm community activist, and that's the most important to me, especially coming from growing up in Boston and Roxbury, being poor, seeing violence, every facet of violence. So that's why I'm here.
Juan Carter, Outreach Manager, Gifford Center for Violence Prevention.
I'm Sylvia Leeson, Program Director for Justice Assistant Corps. I'm also a clinician and I teach Islamic Studies in the Women's Prison.
PJ Fox, I'm the Director of Community Violence and Prevention at the Attorney General's Office.
James Montero, CEO of Reentry Campus Program, also President of the Board of Philly Teams.
Mike Hogan, Department of Public Safety Grant Administration Office, and the Governor's Criminal Justice Advisory Board. And I'm a Scoutmaster down in Washington Park in my free time.
Corey Jones, Chief of Policy and Planning at the Governor's Workforce Board, which is a division at the Department of Labor and Training. So we distribute over $40 million in job training funds. And so my mission, I've been there for almost 2 years, but my mission has been to get as much of that money to CBI work as possible.
Thank you. Yeah, so going back to the point of being as community-led, community-driven as possible, is there any other suggestions around that you should be thinking about looking into for the next couple meetings?
Might seem obvious, but social media.
That is a great point.
Do like the idea about getting out and hearing, from the neighborhoods and stuff, so, or a PCTA listening session, because I think, when you hear from the folks in the neighborhoods, they can tell you exactly where your problem spots are and all of those things. I've attended some community meetings, and the input from folks who you wouldn't expect, but come out for the meetings, is very valuable.
Right. Yes, I think it makes sense for not the next one, but the second one from now to be out somewhere as much as possible. So I think, Lisa, are you able to provide some information regarding the non-license at the next meeting?
Sure.
Makes sense. And then James, are you able to give us any update on the entry of this?
Absolutely. Just when you're thinking of space, think of space that is neutral. Some parts of the city are off limits, not easily accessible, not safely accessible.
Right.
For other.
Thank you. We'll definitely keep that in forefront of anything.
So I think it's important to have multiple sessions of opening it to community.
Right.
Yeah, and I just want to suggest that we instead of making the committee have a event, that we instead support the Nonviolence Institute's ongoing listening sessions. Yeah, and maybe we as a committee can attend one of those listening sessions and take notes. And then maybe even the police advisory committee can give us a presentation about some of the feedback they're getting, or just any other advisory committees that are doing that type of work as well.
And either way, it's always open for space also.
Thank you. So with that being said, is there anyone from the public that would like to share any comments? We have about 10 minutes or so. How many people want to speak? Just two. So Val, if you want to just say your name and.
Yeah, I want to introduce myself. I'm Val Reichert. I live on Mars Avenue, East Side, and I'm a volunteer with Monster Man Action in Rhode Island. My colleagues are with me today also volunteers from Monster Man. And Diana, of course, is one of our survivors from our organization. The Nonviolence Institute is a community partner. And I know that you'll want to meet our state community outreach lead, Jean Griffin, who is with us today and is frequently here at City Hall for different city council events. We support the work. You guys are a blessing to us in our work to stop nonviolence, to stop gun violence, and to hear you doing your work today has been illuminating and enlightening. And anything that we can do as an organization to support your work, please reach out to us through Jean, our community outreach lead for Rhode Island. I think the councilman has her contact information. I'll repeat it to you before I see you again at council. I'm a frequent attender of council meetings, and we'll make sure that our organization is available to you. We have resources because we're part of the Everytown Network, which is a national organization. We have research capabilities, and we have local financial capabilities to support the things you want to do in this venture. We're extremely invested in that you guys being successful with this. God bless you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Val. I think at some point in one of the near future meetings, you guys could present the programs and services and.
Jean's got flyers today. Because there's a community outreach program at FBI, and she's always got flyers whenever there's going to be a program. So.
Yeah, I'm Mike Harris. I moved here to Providence in 2004 to study art from Boston. I've been an advocate for defending Americans with gun violence since Columbine. So I just want to read, the page I got here about the ideas that I have that Warren mentioned, everything else that you guys mentioned to me. The reporting firearms that people have access to, asking people, do you feel like you're in danger of gun violence? Are there unsecured guns around? Do you feel likely to commit, gun violence crimes? There's a mural in one of them in New York that said, stop shooting each other. A safe place to go if you feel like you're in danger of gun violence, education, and GED programs are big, because the one slide did not mention the lack of education being a factor. Amnesty and leniency, gun buybacks, legalized crack in Chicago is one thing that I know that I've always advocated for, that would reduce gun violence in Chicago. Reducing the catalyst, GED programs, dismantling gang violence, a clear condemnation from officials, resources making those sections of the city safe. And then my personal favorite, if you don't reoffend for 10 years, you get free college. It's an idea. And then the idea is to create a new bill to prohibit violent threats from gun owners and money.
Yeah, does anyone have anything else before we wrap up?
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing
Thank
us
you.
together.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, yes, like I said, we have Aaron in the back who's part of our city council staff. He was more happy to share his information with anyone if you guys want to reach out. In the meantime, I think a month from now for the next meeting probably sounds good for folks. Sounds good for me. I don't really check in with you guys first. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
I understand we all have a lot of other commitments.
First Thursday of May, want to do like the same time, first Thursday of the month?
Is that what, I think it's the.
I mean, first Wednesday?
It's going to be the second Wednesday. We'll send out an email again.
To verify.
Yeah, it's verified. So yeah, I mean, if there's nothing else, I'll definitely entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion.
Second.
Made by TJ, second by Corey. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Please reach out if there's anything else that.
If anybody wants some of these resource guides, if anybody wants some of these resource guides, I have packets right now.
Yeah.